and welcome back to another video here on my YouTube channel. How are we all doing? Swell, I hope. I'm gonna put my clips in straight away because my hair is not doing what I want my hair to do today. So we're just gonna put it back. We're just gonna put it away. Oh, I don't like how this is flat to my head. Let's start again. The story I'm going to be telling you about today in this video is the story of the Grapevine Massacre. It's a festive one. In March, not Easter, Christmas. But the story itself, not festive, but it revolves around that time of year. You know, as someone who loves Santa, loves Christmas time, I'm always down to talk about festive things. This, again, isn't festive, but Santa is involved. So, Merry Christmas! Just a very quick trigger warning before I even begin to talk about it. There is a mention of suicide in this video, so if that's triggering to you in any way, then do with that information what you will, and I don't suggest you carry on watching, but you do you. Like I said, we are going to be talking about the Grapevine Massacre. This story is very spine-chilling, and like I said, this revolves around Christmas time. The killer was Santa. Not to jump too far ahead, but Santa is not very holly and jolly this Christmas time, and it also happened on Christmas Day. It's just gone 11 AM on Christmas Day. So December 25th, if you don't know what day Christmas is. That was patronising, I'm sorry. And the year is 2011. So this is, you know, I don't want to say recent, but it's more recent than like other ones I've done where they've been in like the 80s, 90s, whereas like this now is like a decade ago. All of this took place in Grapevine, Texas. The city itself is pretty big, but the neighborhood we're talking about is very, very small, very close-knit. Close-knit? Is that the saying? Close-knit. It's a nice neighborhood and it's small. Everybody kind of knows each other-ish. They're not like best friends, but they know of each other. You get the gist. So like I said, just gone 11 AM, Christmas Day, and 911 was called. At first, all the operator could hear was silence coming from the other end. They thought they could hear like this kind of like mumble, and then towards the end of the phone call, they thought they heard a whisper, and then the line went dead. Like something whispered and hung up. Now obviously the operator has no idea what's going on, like literally nothing was said, but that's kind of a concerning phone call to get, right? There's clearly somebody there, you kind of think you heard a whisper, some mumbles, but they're not saying anything. So the operator, you know, doing their job is like, we need to do something about this, we need to kind of like check out the situation, you know, see if anything's wrong, check they're okay. They tracked down where the phone call came from, like the location, and found that it came from a residential apartment building. This won't come out. Oh, there we go. So the operator then obviously passes on the information to responders and said basically, can you just go check out this apartment because I just had a kind of concerning phone call. We just need to check if they're okay. So basically perform a welfare check. Now with a welfare check, they're not actually allowed to leave until they know the person in that place is okay. Like they literally have to see and speak to the person and make sure that they are A-okay. So the responders get to the apartment building, they knock on the door, but there's no response. They announce who it is and say like, hey, it's the police. Obviously a lot more formal than that, but they're like, it's the police. Can you let us in? Can you talk to us? Are you okay? And after they were seemingly ignored, they put their ear to the door and they heard nothing. Like no moving around, no talking, nothing like that. Like I said before, they're not allowed to leave until they know that that person or the people in that apartment are okay. So because they've been ignored, they have no other choice but to kick the door down because they have to get in there. And once they got inside, they were met with the most disturbing scene you could ever think of, especially on Christmas morning. There were toys everywhere, some open presents, some unopened presents. Like it looked like this family were in the middle of Christmas morning. But along with all of the presents were the bodies of 7 people. Each one of those 7 people had been shot to death. Like I said before, this neighborhood was like very friendly. Like nothing happened in this neighborhood. It wasn't rough, definitely not killings, and if there were, they were few and far between, and especially not full-on massacres. It was a very bizarre thing to happen here. When examining the apartment to see, you know, what could have actually happened here, because the first thing that's going through the police's mind is, oh my god, this family's been murdered. But they noticed that there was no signs of forced entry. Like, the only sign that somebody had forced their way in was literally the door that the police just kicked down to get in. They were the only ones that had forced their way into that apartment. After looking closer at the bodies on the floor, they noticed that 2 of them were holding guns. These 2 people were actually the 2 oldest men in that family. One of them was dressed as Santa. This was Aziz Yazdanpana, who was a 56-year-old man. Because this is literally a massacre, 7 people have been killed, the police at the scene were searching for more clues, while the police back at the station were trying to find out who it was that had been killed. So to do this, they put in the address for the apartment so they could see who owned it. They found that it was owned by a woman called Nasrin Yazdanpana, so Aziz's wife, who was 55 years old at the time. She was also one of the people that was shot dead along with the rest of her family. So at this point we know that Aziz and Nasrin had both been shot dead. Along with that was their 2 children, 19-year-old Nona, who was their oldest, and then 15-year-old Ali, who was obviously the youngest. Along with the 4 of them was Nasrin's older sister, who was called Zora, and her husband, 59-year-old Hussein, and then also their 22-year-old daughter, Sarah. When trying to determine what actually went down, it was very clear to the police that this all happened very quickly. Like, there was no signs of a struggle, it all happened in the same room, and whoever was the one responsible for all of this was trying to get this done as quick as possible. But they did notice that the murders were done with precision. Nikki. Zora, along with all of the kids, I say kids, they're not children, but you know what I mean. They had all been shot in the head several times, while her husband, Hussein, was shot the most out of everyone there. This wasn't just a one shot and done type of situation. This murderer wanted to make sure that they were dead. Nasrin and Aziz were only shot 1 time in the head. Aziz was the one dressed as Santa, by the way. Now, Hussein was shot all over his body. For example, he had 1 in his back, 1 in his shoulder, and 1 in his chest, which led police to think that he maybe was trying to protect his family, because it seemed as though he was moving. Something they found very interesting was that everyone in the room had only been shot with 1 gun, apart from Hussein, who'd been shot with 2. But one of those guns was in Hussein's hands. Like I said, when they went in and they noticed 2 bodies on the floor holding guns, one of the ones that had shot him, he was holding. So this then made everybody start scratching their heads, how? It wasn't long before this very, very horrible story was spoken about throughout the entirety of the neighbourhood. Not just the neighbourhood, actually, the entirety of the city, of Grapevine, knew about this. Because it broke to the news pretty much instantly. Like I said, small town, this type of thing doesn't normally happen, so it's going to spread like wildfire. So all the families in this neighbourhood city were waking up on Christmas morning expecting to have this holly jolly time with their family, opening presents, when actually they met with the news that this poor family had just been completely shot down, and they don't know who the shooter is. So to them, there's a murderer at large. So while all the parents there would expect to just be waking up and watching their kids open up their presents, they're now sitting there worrying that, is there somebody that's doing this to everyone? The police spent the entirety of Christmas Day, and then also into the early hours of Boxing Day, investigating this case. Okay, let's go back to the 911 call. Like I said, they heard a whisper, they thought they heard somebody whispering at the end of the phone call. So they slowed down the audio and used audio enhancing technology to see if they could make out what was said. And they believed that they could hear 2 voices on the phone call, one that was mumbling and the one that whispered. All of the mumbling was actually somebody talking in the background, and it was somebody saying, "Help me." And if that isn't making you feel uncomfortable, what the whisper said? So now, imagine you're the operator on the phone, and imagine you can actually hear what they're saying. So the operator's on the other end of the phone, and they can hear someone saying, "Help me." And then the whisper comes over and says, "I'm shooting people." And then the call just cuts out. No thank you. All they could tell from this audio clip was that the one that whispered was one of the older men, but that's all they could tell. They couldn't tell which one it was because, like, you know, they've slowed it down, like they've messed with the audio, haven't they? So the only way they could tell that this was an older man was because of how deep the voice was. Like, it had a very low register. So that's how they could tell it was one of the men. Next, the police did some ballistic tests, meaning that they were looking at the guns, the bullets, the wounds, and seeing where everything matched up. They also did gunshot residue tests on all of the victims. Now, obviously they're all gonna have some type of gunshot residue on them because one shot goes off in the room, it's gonna go everywhere. Obviously it's going to be more on the person holding the gun and doing the shooting than anyone else, but to make things a little bit more easier to tell who was responsible, they were looking at their hands. So after running all of these tests, they found that there was only one person with a lot of gunshot residue on their hands, and this was Aziz, aka Santa. So following on from this, on the 26th of December, Boxing Day, they make an announcement. They tell people that they're not actually looking for a shooter because they believed they'd already found who was responsible. And, you know, were certain that this person was no longer a threat. Now, remember I said that Hussein was also holding a gun? Well, going back to the gunshot residue thing, they found that Hussein had hardly any residue on him, like on his hands. If he's one of the ones holding it, they were obviously expecting him to have some on him, but there wasn't any. Well, a little bit, obviously, like I said, it goes everywhere, but not enough to indicate he was a shooter. And they also did fingerprint tests on it, on both guns. And they found the one that Hussein was holding not only didn't have his fingerprints on it, but had no prints at all. It had been wiped clean. Say you held a gun, obviously then your prints are on it. You can't just wipe it down with your sleeve, there's still going to be some print left on it. So unless Hussein had covered his hands, with his sleeve or put gloves on, that's how you get away with not having your fingers on it. But he wasn't wearing gloves when he was found, and his hands were completely bare. He didn't have a sleeve over his hands. The gun that Hussein was holding was a 9mm pistol, and the police ran the serial number through the systems and found that it actually belonged to Aziz, and it had been his gun for about 10 years. So now this is all pointed in the direction that Hussein was framed. His prints aren't on the gun, it's not his gun, and he's got hardly any residue on him, yet he was found holding a gun. Things were obviously pointing away from Hussein and going straight in the direction of Aziz. It seemed as though Aziz had massacred his entire family on Christmas Day. Their theory was that he shot his entire family, wiped one of the guns down, put it in Hussein's hands after killing him to make it seem like he was a part of it, and then shot himself. And that is why both him and Hussein were found with guns in their hands. That's their theory. But now they're trying to piece together why. What was the reason, the motive behind this? On Christmas Day, dressed as Santa, you're clearly in, physically, the Christmas spirit. Why did you decide to kill your entire family? It's seeming as though there was some type of family drama. So the police start to look deeper into the whole family and just that little bit further into Aziz. They found that Aziz used to be a real estate agent but hadn't worked for about 10 years. And these 10 years seemed to have been quite a journey for him. While he was still working, he seemed to be this very chilled, cool, nice, friendly guy. He had his family, obviously he was married, he had his 2 kids. Everything just seemed to be going fine for him. The family dynamic was very traditional. Aziz would go out to work and Nazrin would stay at home, do the cooking, do the cleaning. But this is how they'd both been raised, so they were fine with this agreement that Aziz would be the breadwinner, she would be a housewife. Like I said, the 10 years were a bit of a journey for him. I say a little bit, quite the journey. Starting with just the first few years, the family got into quite a bad financial situation, and it was actually all Aziz's fault. Shocker. And this is because he filed a fraudulent tax report. He was fined for this, and had to pay a fine. But then on top of that, he had to pay everything that he owed. The fine itself was $1,000, and $1,000 is already a lot, but what he owed was so much worse. He had to pay back $30,000. $1,000 in installments. So as you can imagine, all they could afford after this was the necessities. Like, couldn't afford anything they didn't desperately need. No luxuries. They could barely even afford to put food on the table, so. And because they were struggling, Nazarene told her husband that she wanted to go out and get a job. You know, she's thinking proactively here. But they were a very traditional family, so Aziz hated any mention of her getting a job. Like, he was immediately offended by her suggestion here, because their family had always run on the fact that he was the man of the house, he was the breadwinner. So his wife going out and making money, he did not like the sound of that in the slightest. In Aziz's eyes, this meant that he wasn't doing a good enough job as a husband, a father, the breadwinner. But obviously to Nazarene, she was just thinking more of, we kind of need to eat. Our kids aren't eating. Like, I just think it would be a good idea if I'm kind of bringing in some money to help. But okay. So with this taking a massive hit on his ego, he tells her straight up, no, you're not going to get a job. Meaning that the family had to continue struggling, not eating, because this man didn't want to have a bruised ego. Men. One thing about this family is that they never argued. They never said when something was irritating them, they just kind of kept everything in, which meant that the house would get very tense when certain things would happen. But Aziz was allowed to voice his feelings. Like, if something was irritating him, he'd have a shout about it. But the family wasn't allowed to do the same back. So this meant that there was a lot of built up resentment towards him, because they're all struggling, it's all his fault, but they're not allowed to say it. They just have to keep on struggling and acting as if they were okay with it. Like, all they're trying to do is help, and he doesn't want to hear it. So you can imagine how frustrating that would be for the family. Even though Aziz was not happy in the slightest, Nazarene ended up going out and getting 2 jobs, and these 2 jobs were at 2 different spas. She needed to do what she knew was right for her family. Fair enough. And with her going out and having 2 jobs and bringing in the money, it meant that the roles in the house switched. This left Aziz feeling very emasculated and obviously bruised his ego even more, because now he's actually considered a house husband. He's doing everything that he once considered as the woman's role: cooking, cleaning, looking after the kids. He put himself in that situation, so him being mad at his family is bizarre to me. Even with her 2 jobs, it still just wasn't enough, and the family ended up having to file for bankruptcy. Now you can imagine the tension in the household. Like, the family are literally having to starve, they got no money, and it's all because of Aziz. So they all hated Aziz in the house, but I don't think he was completely aware of that, because obviously they never voiced it. How oblivious do you have to be to not realise that, you know, everybody you're living with isn't your biggest fan? Sweetie, darling, honey. On quite a few occasions, their daughter Nona would kind of let a few things slip to her friends about her situation at home. We don't know, like, you know, the specifics of what was said, but her friends can recall saying to her, like, my father doesn't do that, like, he doesn't act like that, he doesn't treat me like that. They were just concerned and would often ask her if she was okay. But Nona wasn't that much of a gossiper anyway, it's just not the way that she was brought up. And it seemed as though she had a lot of pride in her family, like that's another way that she was brought up, that they just, there's a lot of pride there in the family. So when they were like showing their concern and asking her if she was okay, she'd be like, oh, like, it's fine, don't worry, I'm fine. She never overdid it with the defending, saying like, he's the best person to walk the planet and he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. She never overdid it, but she would always shut it down and be like, it's not that bad, don't worry. So the family continues to live without money for years and years and years, and it gets to the point where Nazarene just can't do it anymore and tells Aziz that she wants a divorce. Like, she's done, she wants out, and she was not messing around. Like, she took the 2 kids and they moved only about 2 miles down the road, but they moved out into their own apartment just to try and have a fresh start without Aziz, you know, their problem. Aziz didn't even like the idea of Nazarene going and getting her own job, so you can imagine her wanting to get a divorce, move out, take the kids. He didn't deal with this very well. All he had was this family. Like, he had literally nothing outside of it. And he knew that he was completely dependent on Nazarene. Like, she was literally bringing in the money. Life went upside down, even more for him. We love to see it. We do. We really do. Following the investigation, the police went and spoke to people that Aziz knew throughout his life. And they found that there was actually two Azizes. There were two sides to him. There was the emotionally manipulative one that was horrible to his family. Then there was this other Aziz that would venture out into the world as this confident, intelligent man. This side of him was also described as like funny, witty, charming. Not the Aziz we've come to know, is it? So now that he'd been left on his own, he literally did nothing. Oh wait, no, that's a lie. He took up gardening. As for Nasrin, Ali and Nona, things were looking up. Still not great, but better. Like, Nona graduated from high school, started at community college, but everything in terms of family dynamic, that's what wasn't great. We don't know if they were still in contact with Aziz, you know, their dad, but her friends can recall Nona saying that things still weren't great. Now, we land on Christmas Eve 2011. Nasrin, Nona and Ali decide that they want to throw a massive Christmas Eve party for their entire family. And when I say entire family, I really do mean entire family. You've got uncles, aunts, cousins, distant relatives, everything like that. They were all there. Everyone was invited. I say everyone, but Aziz wasn't invited. You know, because they don't like him. But even though he wasn't invited, he still finds out somehow. And boy, was he not happy. Furious, to say the least. Police believe that this was his tipping point. Like, you know, his breaking point where he thought, yeah, I'm actually going to do what I'm thinking of doing. It's nearly 11 a.m, Christmas Day, 2011. And Aziz arrives at Nasrin's apartment in a full Santa costume. At first, he just tries to make it seem as though he's there just to surprise everyone, bring everyone presents, make it a good time. We know that they don't like him, but to Nasrin, you know, it's Christmas Day, that's the father of her children. She put her own feelings to one side and just tried to be happy and jolly, if you will. So now everyone's there, all 7 people, but they don't know what is about to happen. We'll get to that part in a second. Remember Sarah, Nasrin's niece? She actually sent a text message to a group chat just as Aziz arrived. What she said was, "So we're here and my uncle is here too, dressed as Santa." Then around 10 to 15 minutes later, she sends another text saying, "And now he wants to be all fatherly and win Father of the Year." Sarah is older. She's 22, so she's essentially an adult. So this whole like happy father type of act isn't really having an effect on her. She's not buying it. So that's obviously why she sends those texts to the group chat. Only 5 minutes after that text was sent, the police got that eerie 911 call. 5 minutes. Meaning that he went from being Father of the Year to shooting the entire family within 5 minutes. When people learned what Aziz had done, they were beyond shocked, because remember I said how they thought he was this really nice guy. So to everyone else, this seemed like the most out of character thing he could have ever done. Now, what was the motive here for the massacre? They believed that it was jealousy. He was jealous of the life that Nasrin had built for herself and their kids without him, and the fact that they were moving on and completely pushed him out of the family, like he was no longer involved with them. As always with these cases, we're left with so many questions. Like one, for example, why did he try to frame Hussein if he was just going to shoot himself in the same room? Like, it was so obvious that he was the one that put the gun in Hussein's hands. But a theory I did see come up quite a bit when I was doing my research was that maybe that wasn't his plan. Maybe his plan was to kill the family, frame Hussein, and essentially attempt to go on the run. But after actually doing it, he realised what he'd done. Like, he'd just killed his entire family. So that's what led him to shooting himself along with his family. We have come to the end of another true crime story. Another one. DJ! I'll stop. This feels like a very anticlimactic ending. Obviously they figured it out, but like, I don't know. Oh well. But yes, makeup's done. I went for more of like, you know, your everyday type of look. That's what I was fancying today, so that's what we did. As always, if you did enjoy, make sure to hit subscribe, turn on the notification bell so you don't miss my next upload. I upload every Wednesday, or I try to at least. You know, if work's working a little too hard, we may miss an upload. But for the most part, I upload on Wednesdays, so make sure you don't miss them. Every week, it's a brand new story, so why not tag along for the adventure, guys? I will see you in the next video. Love you, bye.